The cameras flashed, the crowd froze, and just like that, Hollywood had a new obsession.
Oh, totally.
The headlines splashed across the internet, carrying the kind of um, absolute finality that just stops you in your tracks. Kelly Osbourne just ended everything.
Yeah, that headline was everywhere.
It really was. We are talking about a sudden, quiet end to a bond that took 27 years to build, leaving a grieving family caught in the crossfire of intense public scrutiny. Welcome to Starscope Report.
So glad to be jumping into this.
Join Jordan and Jamie as we uncover Hollywood drama, music industry shakeups, and viral influencer scandals. From red carpet surprises to social media controversies, we dive deep into the stories behind the fame.
And we've got a heavy one today.
We really do. For this deep dive, we are looking at a story that starts as a sensational tabloid headline, but, it rapidly morphs into a study of compounded grief, parasocial entitlement, and the devastating mechanics of secondary loss.
The timeline of this entire situation is really what makes it so complex. Because, the mainstream media, TMZ, the Daily Mail, they all started blasting the news around March 23rd, 2026.
Right.
And they were framing it as this sudden, shocking collapse. But the reality is that Kelly Osbourne ended her engagement to Slipknot keyboardist Sid Wilson weeks earlier.
Weeks earlier, wow.
Yeah, exactly. The quietness of that separation, like the deliberate attempt to keep it under wraps, it just speaks volumes about the emotional exhaustion happening behind closed doors.
Oh, 100%.
To understand the sheer gravity of this split, you really cannot look at it as a standard 2-year Hollywood romance. You have to rewind to the origin point, which was back in 1999.
1999, which puts them right at Ozfest.
Yes, exactly.
Slipknot is emerging as this terrifying mask phenomenon, and Kelly is a teenager navigating the absolute epicenter of heavy metal royalty. They were entirely forged in the same chaotic, adrenaline-fueled crucible.
It was a crazy environment to grow up in.
Seriously. Surviving the early 2000s reality television era, the intense public battles with addiction, the sheer volume of noise surrounding that family, they did all of that together. They had 23 years of platonic survival before they ever even attempted to shift this into a romance in early 2022.
And shifting a 23-year friendship into a romantic partnership, that requires a massive recalibration of boundaries and expectations.
Yeah, you can't just flip a switch.
No, you really can't. You are taking two people who know every flaw, every coping mechanism, every defense strategy the other person possesses, and then you're adding the intense vulnerability of physical and romantic intimacy.
Right.
But they successfully navigated that initial transition. They welcomed their son, Sidney, in November of 2022. So they were actively converting this legacy friendship into a modern family unit.
And it culminated in what honestly sounds like a scene written for a movie. July 2025.
Oh, this story's amazing.
It is. They are backstage in Birmingham at Ozzy Osbourne's final Black Sabbath concert. Heavy metal history is literally happening on stage, and backstage, Sid officially proposes.
The setting is just iconic.
You have this beautiful, high-stakes, emotional moment, perfectly punctured by Ozzy jokingly shouting, "F off, you're not marrying my daughter," before Sid even gets the ring out.
It was just so Ozzy.
It is the ultimate encapsulation of the Osbourne dynamic, Deeply loving, completely irreverent, and anchored entirely by Ozzy.
Right, which makes the subsequent events so catastrophic. Ozzy Osbourne passed away at the age of 76, just weeks after that backstage proposal.
God, just weeks.
Yeah. The psychological impact of losing a patriarch of that magnitude, it cannot be overstated. We're looking at compounded grief here.
Yeah.
The family didn't just lose a father. They lost the gravitational center of their entire universe. The sources describe Kelly and Sid's relationship post-loss as having this hot and cold dynamic that ultimately buckled.
It makes sense, unfortunately.
It does. Grief physically alters your cognitive function, your emotional regulation, and your capacity to sustain a newly defined romantic relationship. They tried to make it work for their 3-year-old son, but it was just too much.
Let's put a functional lens on this. Think of their 23-year friendship like the foundation of a house.
Okay, I like that.
It's old, it's stable, you know every inch of it. Turning that friendship into a romance and having a child is like building a massive modern mansion right on top of that familiar foundation. It's heavy, but the base is solid.
Right.
Then suddenly, profound grief hits like a catastrophic earthquake. It shakes the ground so violently that even the oldest, most solid structures shatter. It doesn't matter how well you built the new house, it simply cannot withstand that level of seismic shock. The whole thing collapses.
That analogy highlights the mechanics of emotional burnout perfectly. The sheer energy required to mourn a larger-than-life parent leaves nothing left for romantic compromise.
Nothing at all.
The tragic irony of their specific situation is that the person Kelly would normally turn to for support during an existential crisis, her best friend of 2.5 decades, was now the person she was trying to romantically sustain while she was completely depleted.
Oh, wow.
They were trying to be everything to each other in a vacuum of profound loss, and it just became unsustainable, leading to the separation.
But the breakup was just the beginning. Wait until you hear how Kelly responded when the internet decided to kick her while she was down.
Yeah, the media and the public's reaction to this tragedy, it really illustrates a deeply toxic element of parasocial relationships.
That's awful.
Shortly before the timeline of the split became public knowledge, Kelly stepped out to attend the Brit Awards.
Yeah.
And she was there for a highly specific, somber reason.
To accept a posthumous Lifetime Achievement Award on behalf of Ozzy.
Exactly.
You would expect a baseline level of human decency, right? She's standing on a global stage, carrying the weight of heavy metal history, honoring her freshly deceased father.
You would think so.
Instead, the internet unleashed an absolute feeding frenzy. Trolls swarmed her social media, hyperanalyzing her face, her body, her outfit.
It was relentless.
They bypassed the grief entirely to tear apart her physical appearance. It is a terrifying display of how the public strips away the humanity of public figures the literal second they show vulnerability.
It really speaks to the illusion of ownership the audience feels over the Osbournes. Because the public consumed their family dysfunction as entertainment for years on MTV, a vocal subset of the audience feels entitled to criticize them without consequence.
Like they bought a ticket to her life.
Exactly. But Kelly's response to this cruelty was highly instructive regarding her current psychological resilience. She flat out refused to retreat into silence.
She did. She posted a direct response on Instagram, and the phrasing she used was so deliberate. She said, "There is a special kind of cruelty in harming someone who is clearly going through something."
That's a powerful statement.
Very. She drew a hard boundary against being dehumanized. What stands out to me is how fiercely she affirmed her ongoing commitment to her sobriety in that same breath.
Yeah, she made that a huge point.
Maintaining sobriety while your father dies, your engagement collapses, and thousands of strangers mock your face. I mean, that requires an elite level of psychological endurance.
The cognitive load of maintaining addiction recovery under those conditions is staggering.
Yeah.
Every single day is an active, exhausting choice. But, while she was establishing those firm boundaries against the trolls, she was simultaneously leaving these digital breadcrumbs that the tabloid machinery immediately seized upon.
Yes, the tattoos.
Right.
She drops a video on her feed of herself in London getting this bright orange tattoo on her ribcage. Luigi Carbone is doing the ink. Some say it's a star, others say it's a lily. Visually striking, very deliberate. And accompanying this, she posts this really cryptic quote.
What was it again?
"Forgive yourself for not knowing earlier what only time could teach."
The tabloid ecosystem operates on an algorithm of conflict and romance, right? So naturally, the immediate media consensus was to frame this quote entirely around Sid Wilson.
Of course they did.
The prevailing narrative crystallized in hours. Kelly regrets the relationship, she is mourning a failed romantic engagement, and she is forgiving herself for the quote-unquote mistake of trying to marry her best friend.
I am completely pushing back on that media narrative. It is incredibly reductive to view a woman's entire internal life exclusively through the lens of her romantic status.
It really is.
Look at the holistic picture here. She is fighting a daily war to stay sober. She is processing the death of the Prince of Darkness. What if that quote has absolutely nothing to do with Sid?
That's a really good point.
What if "forgive yourself for not knowing earlier" is about the guilt associated with addiction? Or, what if it's about the complex, agonizing reality of losing a parent and suddenly realizing all the questions you forgot to ask them while they were still alive?
The media's rush to shrink her trauma down to a simple breakup quote is basically a defense mechanism for them. Romantic drama is easily consumable. The compounding horrors of addiction recovery and parental death, those are not.
Exactly. It's too heavy for a quick headline.
Your interpretation aligns much closer to the reality of complicated grief. The self-forgiveness she requires right now spans decades of family history, not just the last 2 years of a romantic engagement.
If you're loving how we unpack these Hollywood twists, make sure you're subscribed because the fallout from this split gets even messier, and the narrative the public tries to force onto Kelly becomes aggressively controlling. Up next, we'll talk about the shocking twist nobody saw coming, involving 2 mystery men and a very devastated Sharon Osbourne.
The scrutiny surrounding her social media was merely the precursor to a much more intense surveillance of her physical movements. As we moved into April 2026, the paparazzi and online sleuths began aggressively policing her social life,
It was wild to watch.
and it led to some highly sensationalized conclusions.
Which brings us to Easter in London. Kelly is photographed having afternoon tea at the Dorchester. She's with her son, Sidney, and the tattoo artist Miles Langford. In her social media caption, she casually dubs Langford as Uncle.
Which is so common.
Right. Anyone who has grown up in a non-traditional or heavily touring environment knows that uncle is the universal term for chosen family. But the internet completely weaponized it. They instantly decided this was the new boyfriend.
The public abhors a narrative vacuum. When a high-profile relationship ends, the tabloids cannot tolerate the idea of a celebrity simply existing in a state of neutral grief.
They need a new character.
They must immediately cast a new romantic lead to keep the soap opera running. Ignoring the very clear platonic signifier of uncle in the presence of a child shows just how desperate the media is to force her into a rebound storyline.
And the timeline policing really accelerated with the next major sighting.
Oh, the hairdresser drama.
Yes. The reports hit that Kelly was at a London party, getting extremely cozy and, quote, all over an LA hairdresser named Kiinicki. And Kelly kind of leaned into it by posting photos of him on her Instagram story.
People lost their minds over that.
This single event ignited a massive, fiery debate across pop culture platforms about the acceptable speed at which a grieving, recently separated woman is permitted to move on.
We are witnessing the weaponization of a woman's coping mechanisms. Grief does not look like a Victorian novel where the widow sits in a darkened room for a year.
Right.
Actual, raw grief is loud, it is erratic, and it desperately seeks high-stimulation environments. When your baseline reality is saturated in emotional pain, the brain craves dopamine.
Just a break from the sadness.
Going to a party, seeking the attention of a hairdresser, finding momentary joy or distraction, these are survival tactics.
I want you to think about the absolute hypocrisy of this public demand. Why do we require a performative mourning period from celebrities? Are we demanding she perform her sadness just so we feel comfortable with her trauma?
It's all about public comfort.
And the scrutiny is exponentially magnified simply because she is operating in the immediate shadow of Ozzie's death. The public is acting like going to a party in London is a direct insult to her father's legacy, which is just a grotesque projection of their own rigid expectations.
It is the dark side of parasocial attachment. The audience feels they own the copyright to the Osbourne family's public image. They have decided what the acceptable aesthetic of their grief should be, and any deviation is treated as a moral failing.
Yeah.
Whether Kiinicki is a new romance, a fleeting distraction, or just a friend having fun at a party is irrelevant. The real issue is the public's insistence on acting as the moral arbiter of her recovery timeline.
Stay tuned and hit that subscribe button so you don't miss how stories like this evolve. Because while the internet is busy passing judgment on Kelly's party attendance, the reality behind the locked doors of the Osbourne estate is profoundly heartbreaking.
It really is.
This breakup didn't just sever a romantic tie, it fractured the foundation of the surviving family.
The collateral damage of this split centers heavily on Sharon Osbourne. The reports detailing her reaction introduce a psychological concept known as secondary loss.
Secondary loss.
Right. The primary loss was the death of Ozzie. The secondary loss is the destruction of the support systems, the routines, and the relationships that help the survivor navigate that primary loss. Sharon is reportedly devastated by the end of Kelly and Sid's engagement, and the reasons go far beyond typical motherly disappointment.
The crucial detail that flips this entire story on its head is Sharon's relationship with Sid. Sharon loved him. After Ozzie died, Sid didn't just fade into the background, he stepped up.
He really did.
He became a load-bearing pillar for the daily functioning of that household. When you lose your husband of over 4 decades, you are in free fall. The person who stepped in to provide stability, to be the daily anchor for Sharon, was Sid Wilson, a man who has been woven into their lives for 27 years.
The architecture of the grieving family relied heavily on his presence. When Kelly realized that she could no longer sustain the romantic aspect of their relationship, she didn't just break off an engagement. By necessity, she removed one of the vital structural supports keeping her mother afloat.
Oh, that is so heavy.
Sid was functioning as a shock absorber for Sharon's grief.
You can physically feel the tension of that dynamic. You have Sharon, a grieving widow, desperately wanting the couple to get back together because she needs the safety net that Sid provides. She wants the family unit preserved.
Of course she does.
On the other side, you have Kelly, who is remaining absolutely adamant that the door is closed. Kelly has recognized that staying in a broken relationship to serve as her mother's shock absorber will ultimately destroy her own sobriety and her ability to parent Sidney.
It is an agonizing emotional stalemate. Kelly is enacting a harsh but necessary boundary to save herself. But the ripple effect is that Sharon is left to mourn not only her husband, but the specific version of her family that she was utilizing to survive the initial trauma. The tragedy is that neither woman is wrong. They are simply operating from conflicting positions of absolute emotional survival.
So, synthesizing all of this source material, what are we really looking at? Beneath the flashy, sensational headlines of Kelly Osbourne just ended everything, we are examining the brutal physics of compounded loss.
Exactly.
We are seeing how an unyielding public gaze attempts to sanitize and police the messy, erratic reality of survival. Most importantly, we are watching a family desperately trying to find a new normal and draw a new map of their world when the tectonic plates beneath them have completely shifted.
The sources collectively point to a reality where a 27-year bond could withstand addiction, fame, and reality television, but it could not survive the sheer weight of a patriarch's passing.
Which is wild to think about.
The cryptic quotes, the orange tattoos, the afternoon teas, the loud London parties, these are not the actions of a woman casually dismissing an engagement. They are the erratic, necessary navigational tools of someone trying to find true north after the magnetic poles of her life reversed.
It strips away the celebrity veneer and forces you to confront how any of us process total upheaval. Grief doesn't politely isolate itself to the person who passed away. It fundamentally rewires your capacity to engage with the living.
Yes, absolutely.
It drains your patience, shifts your boundaries, and forces you to reevaluate who has access to your depleted energy reserves. Kelly made the terrifying choice to prioritize her baseline survival over preserving a familiar but failing romantic structure.
Which demands that we, as the consuming public, reevaluate our own complicity in the tabloid cycle.
100%.
The media ecosystem thrives on flattening complex human trauma into digestible, binary narratives of heroes and villains, of moving on too fast or mourning incorrectly. When we participate in the digital policing of a celebrity's grief, we are demanding that they prioritize our comfort over their actual psychological recovery.
Which brings us to a final provocative thought for you to carry forward. We are conditioned by society to believe that the most painful part of a public, shattered engagement is the loss of the romantic partner. But what if the romance is actually the easiest thing to let go of? What if the true agony is losing the specific version of your family that everyone else, like a desperate, grieving mother, was relying on to stay afloat? How do you find the courage to redefine your family's boundaries, to cut the safety net while your loved ones are still falling, knowing that is the only way to ensure you don't all hit the ground?
The courage to enact that kind of boundary, knowing the collateral damage it will cause to the people you love most, is the unseen burden of this entire narrative. It is a profound, quiet devastation playing out under the glare of flashing cameras.
You've been listening to Starscope Report, where Jordan and Jamie uncover the stories shaping Hollywood, music, and pop culture. Thanks for tuning in, and don't forget to subscribe for more stories that keep the stars shining.